We'll start. Okay, welcome to the Literature at Our House open house for spring 2015. This evening, I'll be talking to three groups of people. I'll be talking to my students who are here. I'll be talking to parents of current students, and I'll also be talking to those who are interested, prospective parents, or those who are just interested in education, whether it's literature, online education, or just education in general. I want to make sure, because I'm going to get some feedback from you guys, I want to test out one thing with you, and that's going to be the hand. The hand, that there's a little hand icon that you can click. And when you find that, go ahead and click that hand icon and raise your hand. The hand of spaghetti. Yeah. So Rebecca, you're in a car. It's hard to see the chat. Okay. That's good. So you just get to listen to my voice, which I hear puts people to sleep. It's a very soft voice. Okay, looks like almost everybody has figured out how to raise their hand. That will be helpful. I'll have some questions to ask. And if in case you have something that you want to ask, sometimes I'll miss things in the chat, but if there's something that you desperately say, what are you talking about, Mr. Travers? I don't believe what word you're saying. Stop right there, right now. Raise your hand and say stop. Or say hi. Anyway, there's a lot of reasons you can raise your hand. Okay, so I see a nice little mixture of a crowd here. And for those of you that don't know me, just want to briefly introduce myself. My name is Luke Travers. I've been teaching for 10 years. I've been teaching upper elementary and junior high for 10 years. And I've been teaching literature for 10 years. And I've been teaching online for 2 years. So next year will be my third year teaching. Now, along with teaching literature, my other main domain is art appreciation. Okay, so I just moved over to the next slide. And just to make sure that everything is going well, raise your hand if you can see that next slide just fine. Raise your hand if you can see that next slide just fine. Or you have literature at Our House on top and touching the art at the bottom. If you're having any trouble, let me know in the chat. But I want to make sure that things are running smoothly. Hey, Kieran. Now, the reason why I'm going to bring up that I also focus on art appreciation is because it's going to be important in what I'm going to focus on in tonight's presentation. Last year, I also gave an open house presentation. And in that open house presentation, I focused on the whole process we go through in appreciating a novel, from the beginning to where we want to go through with it. And I took you through 4 steps. And for those of you who weren't at the open house last year, that's the first thing on the Literature at Our House website. On that front page, there's a video of that presentation. So if you want an in-depth presentation on what the process that we take going through a novel is, find it there at literatureatourhouse.com. Tonight, I'm not going to focus on that. What are we going to do tonight? Here's our plan. The presentation is going to be on one thing that I think makes Literature at Our House distinctive. Distinctive from all the other literature programs that I've seen out there. I had the opportunity recently to go to a homeschooling convention, and that was such a wonderful experience because it gave me a taste of who my competitors are, of what the other options are that parents have for the language arts, for English, for literature. So I'm going to talk about one thing that makes Lit AOH distinctive. That's going to be the entire presentation. And in doing so, I'm going to look back at our year and pick out examples. So students, you're going to see familiar things. And also students, you're going to learn some of the reasons why I structure the course the way I do. Some of the method to my madness. It often appears like madness, but there's that will take about, say, 20 minutes. Then for about 10 minutes or so, I'm going to talk about plans for next year. And those of you who are only interested in my approach to literature, the presentation portion is what you want. For those of you who are interested in what next year is going to look like with the books, especially my selection of books, then stick around for that. I'll also talk about the schedule, summer camps that I want to offer, and the possibility of private classes. And then I'll have a bunch of time for questions at the end. But ask me questions as we go along. I may say, oh, I may take a question immediately, or I may say, can you hold off on that for a little while, one or the other. But if you have a question, go ahead and ask it. Sometimes I have questions and I forget about them when the time comes to ask them. So put them in the chat when you have them. Okay. So what makes literature at Owl House distinctive? Now, I actually want to ask you that question for students and parents. Is there something that you feel, and I'm not expecting an answer because it's not something that I've really advertised before or really discussed, but is there something that you find distinctive about literature at our house? And you can, if you have a thought, go ahead and throw it in the chat. So I'm seeing a variety of things. So live lit program, depth of challenge questions, that's true, I'm an oddball. Unique and personal writing assignments, okay, not the typical book report. Inclusion of art, okay. Compared to when I was in school, I like all the books, integration of artwork, the challenge questions. Good. So it sounds like several of you are hitting on things that you find valuable that you can't find anywhere else. What I'm going to talk about is what I think is particularly valuable that I really haven't found anywhere else. Okay, so I'm seeing some more flow, some more come in, small classes, linking the current read to previously read books. Okay. And I'm seeing a couple of items there that are going to connect to what I'm going to focus on. So if I were to put in one word what I think is distinctive about literature at our house, here's the one word. Integration. Integration. Now that's a broad-ranging idea, and it's not a new idea. And it's an idea that you can find in some way in all kinds of different things and all kinds of different curricula. In fact, integration is something that a lot of schools try to do. Let's integrate our math with our English or our science with our history. But I always feel like it's not done in a meaningful way. So what do I mean by integration? Here's what I mean. It's the practice of making insightful connections. The practice of making insightful connections. So this is something that the students are doing. The practice of making insightful connections to come to a meaningful understanding of deeper ideas. Come to a meaningful understanding of deeper ideas. And if I were lecturing to a college class and I was going to ask them to write anything down in their notes, this would be it. It's not quite a definition, but it's an explanation and elaboration of what I mean by integration. It's not superficial, and it's not something that it feels like it's trying to cram things together. And it's not something that the teacher imposes on the student and says, these two are connected. It's thinking that the student does to bring a variety of things together to see how they are similar and how they are linked by a deeper meaning. And what I'm going to do in this presentation is I'm going to take you through several different ways in which we integrate in class. And I've already seen a couple of examples in the chat of what we do. Okay. So Catherine, you're saying the statement describes the ideal outcome of creative learning where students are truly making learning their own. That's interesting. I don't know much about creative learning. Maybe I'll come back to that. That might be an interesting topic to see how what I do might be a little bit different from the process of creative learning. So first thing I want to look at is literature and history. Now, many of you already know that literature at our house dovetails with history at our house. And Madeleine, you'll remember Mr. Powell. So Mr. Powell, Scott Powell, does history at our house. And the way that literature at our house dovetails with history at our house is that the history curriculum for Mr. Powell is divided up into 3 different years. An American history year, a European history year, and an ancient history year. And the literature theme of literature at our house corresponds with the history topic of that year. Now, what this integration serves is one main thing: context. To give students context for appreciating literature more that would seem foreign. So if we're reading about pioneers in the West and Shane, a little bit of history knowledge of that time period gives a clear idea of what the West looks like, why people are going out, and the literature serves as a concretization for one part of the history. However, literature stands on its own. The history helps by providing the context. But the goal of the literature class is not to provide an image or a concretization of history. It's to teach literature appreciation. And one way to appreciate literature more and get more out of it is having that historical context. Most of my students, however, aren't in the History at Our House program, and it is not a requirement. But those who do both, I think, have found it valuable to see how they integrate with each other. So that's the first integration. Here's the second. Novels and poetry. We do novels, junior high does plays, and we all do poetry. The poetry that is selected, though, will somehow integrate with the novels that we read. So here are a few examples. These are selections from the upper elementary course this year, where our history integration was American history. And what I've got here are a list of novels and some of the poetry that we did and the poetry that combined with those novels. Now this is a list, and I'm just going to give you a couple quick examples. If we had more time, I'd be more thorough, but just to give you a sense of the integration. So, and because we're going slow on time, I'm going to skip down to Anne of Green Gables, which is one that I bet most of you have read, at least most parents. So Anne of Green Gables. The poem that we did was a poem called Do It Now. And you guys know that Anne of Green Gables is about an orphan in Nova Scotia who has a bright, fancy-free personality, very imaginative, and who doesn't quite fit with the more stern Marilla, her foster mother. And one of Anne's flaws is that she has this pride and stubbornness, especially when it comes to one particular boy, that she at some point starts to like and wants to be friends with, but refuses to do so. The poem that we did was called Do It Now. And this is just one quick line from the poem. It's a poem about praising somebody, showing them that you care, and the value of doing so immediately. Don't withhold your adoration till the parson makes oration, and he lies with snowy lilies on his brow. Now, that's a very poetic way of saying, don't tell him how much you like him until when he's dead. He's not going to matter. When he lies with snowy lilies on his brow. Now, when we go through and we read the poem, I'm not explaining to the students there is going to be some connection. We're going through with this poem as if it's something completely new. And it is. It's about a funeral, which just seems kind of morose. It's very nice. It's a nice poem, I promise. But then, when I start asking the question, okay, now can you see any kind of connection with the meaning, the theme of this poem with Anne? And then suddenly light bulbs go. And the theme of the poem, the value of immediate praise, the value of immediate acknowledgement of a person that you care about, immediately becomes enriched by the memory of Anne, who refuses to acknowledge that she cares about this other character. So that's one quick example from the upper elementary. In the junior high, just to give you so that you can see some more, I'll talk about one more of these little examples. So To Kill a Mockingbird. The Minister's Black Veil is a short story by Nathaniel Hawthorne. An Enemy of the People by Henrik Ibsen, and Shane by Jake Schaefer. So one quick example, To Kill a Mockingbird. And I bet many of you have read it, and you might even be looking forward to the this quote-unquote sequel that's going to be coming out in June, in fact. So one of the things that we focused on in To Kill a Mockingbird was the theme of empathy. The theme of empathy. You only truly understand someone when you walk in their shoes. And the poem that we did was called When You Know a Fellow by Edgar Guest. And here's just a little outtake of the poem. When you get to know a fellow and you understand his ways, then his faults won't really matter, or you'll find a lot to praise. Remember that one, Connor? And the poem is about the value of empathy and not letting first judgments or prejudices get in the way of getting to know somebody better. And To Kill a Mockingbird, the children's side of the story is about making this horrific recluse of a man come out of his house because they're fascinated by him. But in fact, there's more to this man than his outward horrificness, if that's a word. So to get at deeper meanings, to get at themes, we see them pop up in different places using poetry. Now, next up, literature and art. literature and art. So I've spent a lot of time with art appreciation. Many of you know that I wrote a book on my approach to art appreciation called Touching the Art. And that's a lot of that influence from Touching the Art has come over into literature at our house. So how do we integrate art and literature? I'll give you just a couple examples. I'll have several on here, but I'm just going to focus on one or two. So let me see. Fever 1793. It's a story of a teenage girl, a young teenage girl, who wakes up one morning in 1790s in Philadelphia, and a plague has come to devastate Philadelphia. And soon she finds herself having to take responsibility, not only for herself, without anybody else's help, but also for others. And we did this artwork, and here is an excerpt of the artwork. The artwork is called Belisarius. Mainly, you might remember Belisarius. And Belisarius is a depiction of a Byzantine general who was very successful, but then was accused of corruption and trumped up charges of jealousy, and was found guilty and had his eyes gouged out, blinded, was stripped of everything, and was left with but a guide. And in this scene, he's wandering through the wilderness with his guide in his arms because his guide has just suffered a devastating accident. And then we took a look at Maddie, and we took a look at Belisarius, and we say, how is this young girl from Philadelphia in the 1700s similar to this general from the Byzantine Empire? And then we see the idea of perseverance in the face of tremendous odds. And I wanted to stress that the verb I used, we see that idea of perseverance. An idea can be better grasped if you have several examples. When we combine Maddie and Belisarius together, we don't get individual characters anymore. We get the combination or the idea that we abstract away. We get that perseverance. I'll give you an example from the junior high. So, Les Miserables. Now, Les Miserables, which I just finished with the junior high students yesterday, it's a story about an ex-convict who starts off in life as a cynic, angry at not just the people who put him in prison, not just the society that turns him away, but angry at the world and angry at humanity, angry at God, shakes his fist at God. And then we took a look at this painting, and this is just half of it, but a relevant half. And I just throw it in there without any apparent explanation of why we're looking at this painting. It's set in the 1800s, so the clothing might be similar, but that's not the essential similarity. As we read the painting and we see more closely, we see that this man is shackled, and he's a prisoner. And on the left-hand side, there is a guard, and he's a prisoner having his last meal before he's executed. And Molly, you'll remember this, having been in Seattle. It's at the Fry, yeah. And then on the ground you see this book, and it's the only book around, and possibly a book that meant a lot to him, but obviously something has happened to it. It wasn't simply placed down for storage, but thrown down. He, and we can see by his posture, is angry. But it doesn't seem like he's angry at one particular thing. He is harboring bitterness at the fact that there's nothing worth living for, nothing worth either writing about or reading about, or there's a meal on his table, but that was thrown off the table. And what we see in this character is that kind of bitter cynicism that we saw with Jean Valjean. And with this image in our minds, combining it with Jean Valjean, then as we see the transformation of Jean Valjean, it becomes more powerful. All right, I'm going to pause right here. Any questions so far on the kinds of integrations I've mentioned, and with the history, with the poetry, with the art? I also do music integrations. The name of the painting is, I think it's The Last Meal of a Condemned Man. And I'll write the name of the artist right here because it's a challenging name. I think it's Munkaksi. Let me write that down. That's the best way to do a Google search. I think something like that. Munkaksi. Something like that. The Last Meal of a Condemned Man. But then we also, so just integrations between An Enemy of the People and Michelangelo's Moses, and an integration of To Kill a Mockingbird with a story from ancient Greece. Now, there are two more important ways in which we integrate. And if we had more time, I'd go more in depth. But I just want to give you an indication. First, novels with each other. Now, that might seem like something obvious, but it isn't. It's just a habit that we start developing as we pick up our pace through the year. And I saw it in the chat a little bit earlier, how we keep calling back connections to previous characters. We develop just the question in our mind, does this character remind us of somebody that we know? Or does this situation remind us of somebody that we know? So we connect Tom Sawyer to Anne of Green Gables. And we just make it a practice. Now I've got certain connections that are clear to me that I ask about in the challenge questions that were mentioned a few times as a super challenge. But often, because we make it a practice, those connections start to come automatically. And that's the kind of thing that I look for, those kinds of integrations. When the students start to understand what my game is, and they start to call me out, say, oh, I know why this is here. I know why we're doing this poem. I know why we're connecting this, where we got this artwork. And that's the kind of thinking that I want the students to develop, the kind of habit of integrating. Now there's one more form of integration that I want to bring up. That's literature with your life. And this might be the most important of all. Because this allows you to empathize with the characters, to understand them, not just intellectually, but to understand them with your life and to feel for them, to connect with them, to say, I know Anne, she's just like me, or I want to do things like Tom Sawyer does, play being a pirate. Or I understand what Thomas Stockman is going through, being shunned by everybody, because sometimes I feel that way. And to give you some examples of that, I'm not going to, we're already 30 minutes in. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to direct you to the one of the blogs. There's a writing workshop I do with many of the students, and you can check out some of the writing assignments. Let me post this here. And there are more writing assignments coming up, but here there are a few, and you'll see some integrations of characters with personal life and some of that. Okay. If you want to go to that page and maybe bookmark it, if you're interested in taking a closer look at the kinds of integrations that we make, go ahead and do so. All right. So, integrations, literature and history, novels and poetry, literature and art, novels with each other, and literature with life. And I often also throw in literature and music. Some of you might remember when I played It's My Life by Bon Jovi or the poem The Westerner. There was a connection there. I promise there was a connection. All right, that ends my presentation portion. And I want to see if there are any questions on that. So what I would claim as distinctive about literature at our house is integration, to make it a practice of finding meaningful connections. Okay, now I see one person typing. Go ahead and keep typing, but I'm going to keep going with plans for next year. So if this was all you were interested in for tonight, thank you very much for joining me. Right now I'm going to talk about the book selections for next year. So I'm going to start with, let me see if I got both content up. It's working. All right, I'm going to start with the upper elementary. I see some clamor for an adult class. I've had thoughts of creating a kind of book club that's different from typical book clubs. Usually you have book clubs where you have the book club meeting after you read the novel. I thought of having one when you're halfway through or two-thirds of the way through, where you kind of discuss the meaning before you get to the climax of the story, so you feel prepared for the climax rather than confused by what's happening while you're reading. Yes, Anne, it will be. That's my weekend plan, to get all this up on the website. So just a quick look at the literature for the upper elementary. Now the literature list and the poetry, this is all tentative. Much of what, I have a list of many things to pick from, and we'll probably do most of these, but it depends on the class dynamic, the approximate level of the students, the makeup of the class, that I pick out exactly which books during the year. But things we'll definitely do, some Greek myths. We'll definitely do some stories of Homer. Oh, Catherine, looks like you've got an issue with the video. Can you still hear me, Catherine? Deleuze is great. And I'm going to decide between Deleuze or Coolidge. As well, I'm going to decide between either um, Sutcliffe is the one who does the Black Ships before Troy and Wanderings of Odysseus, or the Children's Homer, which is also really good, but the language is a little bit more challenging. We'll definitely do some Aesop's Fables. And then a few novels set in the time periods of that are focused in history. The Golden Goblet, set in ancient Egypt, wonderful story about a young gold worker, goldsmith. Theris in his town, an Athenian boy goes to Sparta and gets a culture shock. Anna of Byzantium, a young heiress is taken away from the throne and she plots her revenge. And then a couple of other non-ancient history related ones that I'd like to get to. A Little Princess that many of you I'm sure have read. And then a play that I often teach for the 7th graders, but I think is a good one to introduce plays to for upper elementary, called The Winslow Boy by Terence Reddick. And here you can see some of the selection of poetry. Any questions here for the book lists for upper elementary? So Catherine, what you should do is log off and log back on. So just close your window and open it up, relaunch the class. And that goes for anybody if you have any issue. So have I chosen the first book of the year? I haven't yet. It would probably either be Aesop's Fables, or I might dive into the Golden Goblet, one of those two. Golden Goblet, Egypt, chronologically would be the first one. Okay, so let me take a quick look at now the junior high reading list. Molly, no, I don't have a particular addition to this. I like the ones with pictures. There's one I have in mind that I've used before, but I don't know if I'd use it again. So I'm not sure. That's one I'm going to do research on. Now, for junior high, types of works that I pick out for junior high students are works that are written for adults. These are classics, but I think are accessible to students. So there will be mythology, of course, and I like Edith Hamilton. The Iliad and the Odyssey. Now there are a couple of there's a translator that I like named Robert Fagles, and we would read selections from these. I'll write down Robert Fagles here. Antigone is a wonderful play by Sophocles. Earlier Greek plays are just, there's not much going on in them, and later Greek plays aren't that interesting. But Sophocles with Oedipus Rex and Antigone, he's a great playwright. Then there's one I'd consider doing, Polyeucte by a French playwright named Pierre Corneille. He wrote the play The Cid, which became a Charlton Heston movie. The Polyeucte is about Christians in ancient Rome who become iconoclasts. Christians who get caught up in the persecution of the Roman Empire against them. We might see some parallels to one of the plays that we read called Inherit the Wind from this year. Then I always think about using some Shakespeare in my classes, but I also always want to make sure that we have enough time to devote to him, because one of the challenges with Shakespeare is getting over that hump of the language. But Julius Caesar would be a good one to to give a shot for. And then a few others that aren't set in ancient time periods. I'm always going to do a Victor Hugo novel. 93, set during the French Revolution, has some great parallels to Antigone. Oh, Manly, you remember Modovana? You know what? That's one I haven't taught yet. All right, Connor and Deborah, I'll talk to you guys later. See, the Browning version is another play by Terence Rattigan. And this, the explanation of it is the worst possible explanation for any student. They'll completely dismiss it, but it's probably one of the most meaningful, most powerful plays a student can read. So you want to hear the explanation? It's about a depressed teacher coming to the point where he's going to retire. So that's what it's about. So, but that's like the worst possible explanation. And yet it's so valuable. And then Pygmalion by George Bernard Shaw, the wonderful play that My Fair Lady is based on. And then a few of the poems. Any questions about the junior high selection? All right. I want to wrap it up by talking logistics. So those of you who aren't interested in logistics like schedules and summer camps and so forth, have a good night. Thank you for coming along. And for those of you who are sticking around, here are some details that I know right now. There's going to be more in the coming days. Oh, so Catherine, what you might have missed is, let's see, Catherine, do you mean in the book selection you're asking if the junior high is the same as the upper elementary? No, so you might have missed one portion. So I had a separate portion for the upper elementary and a separate portion for the junior high. Maybe when you logged off. So beginning and end dates, August 24th and May 30th for 2015-16. And then the schedule. So the schedule is the same as it was for this year. The upper elementary meets 2 to 2:35 p.m. Eastern Time on Mondays and Wednesdays, and on Fridays, 11 to 11:35. And then the junior high, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 1 to 1:45. The writing workshops, the upper elementary, Tuesdays, 2:30 to 3:15, and junior high, Tuesdays, 1 to 2 o'clock. And then one thing I want to introduce, it's something that I've done over the course of the past few years, but haven't really offered it up to anyone extensively, is private classes. I know maybe many junior high students who are with me move on, and if they want to keep going with literature at a house style, learning of literature and writing, then I'm going to start offering and advertising for private classes. So one-on-one sessions with a particular book that we talk about reading and writing assignments that are fitted to the student. Yeah, correct. So yeah, after looking at all the differences for the classes, this is the schedule that made the most sense. So homeschool high school, I guess would be the way to put it. Private classes for high school students at that age, at the high school age. So 10th, 11th, 12th grade. Okay, any other questions about this schedule? All right. Now, one more thing I want to bring up. If you're curious, for those of you who aren't familiar with Literature at Our House, and you're curious about how the online thing works and you want to give it a shot, then a summer camp might be a way to go. Or those of you who can't get enough of Mr. Travers, woohoo, and wanted to see them during the summer, then I want to build up on what I did last year. Last year I offered an art appreciation summer camp, 1 week, about an hour and 15 minutes a day, where we did intensive art appreciation. Yes. And I'd like to offer another art appreciation course for beginners, and then also, if there's enough interest, an advanced one building on what was done in last year's. I'm also thinking of a 1-week course, maybe on a Shakespeare play or one short novella, maybe something like Anthem or The Giver, or a few short stories. And then also a poetry appreciation, where we spend our time with 3 or 4 poems, 5 poems, practice the process of translating them, of understanding them, and of integrating them with our lives, with art, with other literature that we know. And this is where, if you're interested and you have a schedule, this is where you can contribute. These are the proposed dates that I have. Bye, Kieran. And if what you can do is you can take a look at these weeks and at the options. And then if you have a strong preference, then you can email me and say, Mr. Travers, we would love poetry appreciation from July 20th to the 24th. And let me just put my email address on here as a reminder. Yes, Molly. And in fact, I have a couple of adults who sit in on the literature at our house courses. And who aren't just parents either. I know lots of parents do, and it's a good way for them to kind of follow along and read and participate. But also, I've got some who are just there because I don't know why. They like the funny faces I make. Yeah. So prices for summer camps, I think it's going to be around something between $80 and $100, $80 and $100, something like that. I think last year. So classes for private tutorials. That's something I still need to think about. Typically, when I've done them, it's been $60 an hour. But I was in Southern California or for that market, and that's a market that's $60 an hour is average. So it's something that I'll think about and then might negotiate. So that would be for the private lessons. So signups. Now, those of you who are already students, already with me, and you're continuing for next year, I've got your seat filled. You can just send me an email saying you're with me, or when we have our parent-teacher conferences next week on Tuesday or Wednesday, we can work that out. My plan is to have payment ready to go, the payment PayPal thing on the website ready to go on June 2nd, so on Monday. So June 2nd will be the day where you put your money where your mouth is for anybody who's interested. But if you are interested in any of it, the classes are limited in size. I'm even thinking about going down from 15 to 10 and just limited at 10 students. If you are interested, email me. Let me know. And yeah, I'll put the UE flower. Here it is. I'll put my email address on here again. All right. Let's see. Tell you what, I'll take questions for another few minutes if you want to stick around. If you got all the information that you want, then thank you for coming, and I will talk to you guys, many of you, in class tomorrow for our final day of classes, and many of the parents, I'll talk to you guys next week. But otherwise, thank you all for coming, and if you're interested, just send me an email. So Fiona, okay, summer camp classes recorded? Yes, they are. Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks, Neely. Okay, let's see. I might have missed some of the questions in the chat. So let's see. Are the summer camp classes segregated by U, E, and JH? Good question. For the literature, it would be. So, for example, if I did Othello as a summer camp class, or we did Shakespeare and Othello, then I would probably do it just for junior high. But maybe somebody like Nemo, I think, might get into that. And I would segregate that. For the art appreciation, I would probably have it a mixed group, depending, but probably the last year for the art appreciation, I did a mixed group. All right, so I got to vote for advanced art. Okay. And Anne, if you want to send me dates that work best for you. Manually, yeah, stay in touch, and I'm curious and interested to see to hear about your classes at UC Berkeley. Oh, hold on, Manly, are you gone yet? Okay, let me get you unmuted. I want to hear your voice. Oh, I'm going to pause. Yeah. I think there were a couple of questions. If you still had a question that I haven't answered, that's gotten lost in the chat, let me know again. So let's see. What are the literature possibilities for UE for summer camp? One possibility I'm thinking about is The Giver. Another possibility might be one of these sequels. So something like a sequel to the Book of Three, The Black Cauldron, or Anne of Avonlea. Hey, Manly, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh man, your voice is deep. All right, it's good to hear from you.
You too. I'll talk to you. I'll send you an email. I'd love to keep in contact.
You got it. Talk to you
All
later.
right, good night, Luke.
Okay, let's see. Tony, you've got, are the summer camps recorded so that students can access them if they miss? Yes, everything is recorded. And usually they're pretty good about turnaround. Usually they're available within a couple of hours. Sometimes it takes half a day, but usually within a couple of hours they're available. So if you miss it, you can watch that night. Gabriel signed up immediately for the Black Cauldron. Let's see. Literature for the junior high. So a couple of thoughts. Othello was one. Anthem by Ayn Rand is another. Then also maybe something like Taming of the Shrew or Romeo and Juliet. Something like that. Let's see. Caleb maybe promised to tell you that. Oh, thank you, Caleb. Yeah. I think what I need to do if there's enough interest and it's for the summer camp this year, what I'll do is I'll advertise in the spring for the summer camp. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna pause the recording and stop the recording so goodbye people and record.